This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A second Ebola patient dies in Uganda amid a heightened screening at border with DR Congo. The first ever Democracy Day is marked in Nigeria. And Chinese President Xi Jinping begins a state visit to Kyrgyzstan. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Anti-corruption bodies from across Africa meet in Nigeria to develop new strategies of fighting the vice. And an international company operating in Uganda doubles maternity leave for its female employees. We begin in Uganda, where a second Ebola patient has died. The 50-year-old was part of the family of a young boy who died on Wednesday after testing positive for the deadly virus. The family had crossed into Uganda from the border with DR Congo. Authorities say all the people in contact with the family have been tracked down and are being monitored. Authorities are also screening people for Ebola virus at the town close to the border to prevent more cases. Well, according to the country's health ministry, 2 other people remain in intensive care.
The Ebola outbreak in the DRC is still going on. And by today, we have over 2,000 confirmed cases. And so the probability of more cases crossing over from the DRC into Uganda is very high. And so apart from the cases that we already have in country, many other cases may come into the country. Right now we don't have any probable cases because the probable cases are the ones who have turned positive after the tests were carried out. But we are keeping a very close eye on the family because we have a complete family that came in from the DRC with this lady, together with her husband, who are very close contacts of the first case that passed away. So we are keeping a very close watch.
Meanwhile, Congolese and Ugandan health officials have agreed to strengthen the surveillance of Ebola cases at border entry points. Senior health officials from neighbouring countries met at the Ugandan border town of Kasese following the confirmation of the first Ebola case in Uganda. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
A 5-year-old boy who contracted the Ebola virus in the DRC and crossed to Uganda with his family died yesterday in the western Ugandan town of Kasese. The boy is said to be buried later in Uganda. Health officials have confirmed that 2 of his family members are also infected with Ebola. Congolese authorities say the members of that family will be repatriated to the DRC to continue their medical treatment. Health workers in the DRC had listed the family as contacts of a confirmed Ebola case in the Congolese town of Mabalako and transferred them to an Ebola isolation center. But 6 members of the family are reported to have left the isolation center on foot and crossed into Uganda through pathways to avoid health checks. Health officials from the DRC and Uganda have now agreed to strengthen the Ebola surveillance at their borders. The DRC has also given Uganda 400 doses of an Ebola vaccine and expressed its willingness to send vaccination teams to help immunize people. The 2 countries are working on a formal document that will define the health cooperation between them in the fight against Ebola. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, for the very latest from Uganda, we're joined now by CGTN's Isabel Nakiria, live from the capital, Kampala. Isabel, another Ebola patient in Uganda has died. What more can you tell us about this and the status of the other cases?
Thank you. The second Ebola victim who died of Ebola last night is a grandmother to the first victim, that is the 5-year-old boy. She died last night and is supposed to be buried today. And the Ministry of Health says they are going to use all the control measures that to lessen the infections in the area. We also understand that another boy who is a brother to the first victim, he must be about 3 or 4 years old, is also confirmed to be having Ebola. So that brings the cases of confirmed victims to 3 of the same family. So those 8 family members crossed from the DRC, as you heard from the previous report, and 3 people are confirmed to have the virus. 2 of them dead already, and the other 6 are in isolation, meant to be repatriated, I think, today.
So 3 cases, as you say, 2 of them have died. What is the country doing, especially in the Kasese region, to prevent more cases of Ebola being reported in Uganda?
There is commitment from both the governments, the DRC and Uganda. Today, we've been told that the health teams from the Ministry of Health Uganda, the WHO and CDC from both countries have been meeting in the Western District of Kasese, and they have both agreed to step up efforts at the border points. They are particularly going to take interest to the non-designated points at the border. Those must be the pathways that people walk through unnoticed, and they'll also step up screening measures at of course, the normal entry points. These teams are moving in all the 8 districts bordering the DRC and checking whether all the hospitals, the specific hospitals selected in these 8 districts have isolation units and are fully equipped. We also understand the DRC, of course, is giving Uganda 3,500 doses of the vaccines, and the health workers, frontline workers in Uganda will be vaccinated tomorrow. We know that already 5,000 health workers in Uganda received the vaccine some months ago, and so more workers will be vaccinated. We know that the 6 people of the family that have been identified suspected of Ebola will be repatriated. The DRC has already sent in a fully equipped ambulance, and they will be sending them back to the DRC today.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Isabel Nakiria there from Kampala in Uganda, following the number of cases of Ebola that have arisen in Uganda. To other news now. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously approved the extension of Libya's arms embargo for another year to help diffuse the tension among Libyan armed factions. The UN believes this step could help in reaching a political solution. CGTN's Adel El-Bakhrouhi filed this report.
Libya's arms embargo extension gives the authority for Security Council member states to inspect vessels whenever it's believed they violate the ban. That and the unanimous approval during Tuesday's Security Council meeting give the impression that the world is working to cut the weapons supply to Libya. Analysts, however, insist that international players are being hypocrites.
Officially, all countries say they reject the ongoing military operations around Tripoli. They are calling to an end of violence and resorting to dialogue. On the ground, you'd find the opposite. UN has warned about the spread of arms in Libya. It has reported 29 million weapons in a country whose population is only 5 million.
Turkey and Qatar from one side, Egypt, UAE and Saudi Arabia from another have been accused of fueling the ongoing clashes between Libya's rival governments.
It's clear now that the international parties are supporting one government over the other. Libya has become a battlefield for international conflicts. Countries are fighting to have support inside Libya so that when the time comes, they'd have allies in Libya's government who will then give them contracts in rebuilding and in oil.
The result, Libyans are still fighting each other, while extremist and terrorist groups are nurturing on the security void the country suffers from. and hopes for a unified government for the North African state fade away.
The UN has imposed the arms embargo on Libya in 2011, aiming to de-escalate the violence. Since then, fighting in Libya never stopped. Last April, Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar has launched an offensive against Tripoli, where his rivals and the internationally recognized government are stationed. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Tunisia, Egypt and Algeria have pledged to support Libya's efforts in the war against terrorism and urged all Libyan decision makers to make political concessions in order to end the conflict in the North African country. The decision was reached during a meeting in Tunis attended by regional foreign ministers. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has more.
The foreign ministers of Tunisia, Algeria and Egypt gathered on Wednesday evening in Tunis for a consultation meeting on Libya.
We express our deep concerns about the current situations in Libya. We've agreed within the framework of our tripartite initiative to invite all Libyan stakeholders to the negotiating table and to reach an immediate and unconditional ceasefire.
The meeting was held at the initiative of Tunisian Foreign Minister Khmaïz Hinawi. It is part of the follow-up of the tripartite presidential initiative for a political and comprehensive settlement of the Libyan crisis.
Our countries are the closest to Libya in our shared history, culture, and common future. We are the most concerned about Libya's security and prosperity. There is no way out but the political settlement. We've agreed to support Libya's effort in fighting terrorism.
Heads of the Tunisian, Egyptian and Algerian diplomacy denounced the increase in the number of civilian victims and casualties, as well as the destruction of Libya's infrastructure.
Algeria expresses its deep concern and discontent regarding the ongoing fighting in Libya, which started 2 months ago. We regret the targeting of vital civilian facilities like airports, hospitals and schools, as well as populated areas.
Foreign ministers of Libya's neighboring countries urged for the resumption of the political process under the auspices of the United Nations. They also rejected the military solutions or foreign interference in the internal affairs of Libya.
The foreign ministers of Tunisia, Algeria and Egypt have so far held 7 meetings on Libya. The ministers of the 3 neighboring countries insisted on the preservation of Libya's sovereignty and its territorial integrity. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Nigeria has for the first time celebrated a Democracy Day. This comes 20 years after a civilian politician, Moshood Abiola, was executed for declaring himself duly elected president of Nigeria. CG10's Kalechi Emekalam has more.
Military parade and cultural display. All part of a grand ceremony to mark a turning point in Nigeria's political history. A courageous move by businessman turned politician MKO Abiola to announce himself duly elected president of Nigeria. He was arrested thereafter, tried and executed in 1998. His bravery rallied Nigerians to demand for transformation from military rule to democracy.
The day is the day our democracy is born. About 20 years ago, MK Abiola won an election far and wide of this nation. Unfortunately, it was denied. And this present president, Muhammadu Buhari, deemed it fit that he's going to put the right peg in the right hole.
June 12, now known as Democracy Day, is a symbolic commemoration of Nigeria's transition from military dictatorship to a democratic dispensation in 1993. It's now being celebrated officially for the first time after President Muhammadu Buhari signed it into law. But the day is also meant to celebrate President Buhari's second election victory.
Over the next 4 years, we are committed assembling a strong team of Nigerians and allies to implement our transformative plans and proposals.
And key among the president's transformative plans are overhauling the education sector, fighting corruption, restoring security across Nigeria, and carrying on with his plans to diversify the economy. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, as Kelechi was saying there, June the 12th marks a significant day in the history of Nigeria's struggle for democracy. Africa's most populous nation is also commemorating its longest democratic rule without military interruption since independence in 1960. CGTN correspondent Philehaza tells us more from Abuja.
June 12, 1993. Nigerians took part in an election that many still believe to be the country's freest, fairest and most peaceful. Chief MKO Abiola won the most votes and declared himself the winner. But the military government at the time annulled the election, claiming irregularities and jailed him for treason. The military wanted him to renounce his own victory, but he remained defiant and was kept in detention until he died 5 years later. It wasn't until 1999 that Nigeria's military handed over power to a civilian government. Since then, the country has seen 4 presidents elected in 5 polls.
I didn't think that this checkered democracy will survive till this day. You will recall that in the West, permutations were made to the effect that Nigeria will not survive until 2015. It was topsy-turvy, but we got past it, and now this is another experience. We are recording success.
The Vice President and I...
In June last year, President Muhammadu Buhari declared June 12th as Nigeria's Democracy Day in honor of MKO Abiola, but it hasn't been plain sailing for the country's democracy over the last 2 decades. There have been ethnic tensions as well as corruption and electoral malpractice, and Nigeria continues to face high levels of insecurity, poverty and unemployment.
Whichever day they choose, as in maybe May 29 or June 12, the most important thing is just for us to enjoy the dividends of democracy.
I hope the current president will take a clue from Abiola's struggle so as to deliver a good governance to the people.
It's a thing of joy. Democracy has lasted for 20 years. I think Nigeria is making progress. So I think we should, for the fact that democracy has come to stay in Nigeria, it's worth celebrating.
President Muhammadu Buhari swore a new oath of 4 years in office last month. His promise to improve the lives of over 200 million citizens, as well as tackle corruption and uphold the rule of law.
As Nigeria celebrates its maiden official Democracy Day, many Nigerians are urging leaders to encourage coexistence despite ethnic, religious and social-political divide, so the country can celebrate many more June 12th. Philehaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... Chinese President Xi Jinping begins a state visit to Kyrgyzstan. And we get you an update on efforts to revive the stalled political process in Syria.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kyrgyz President Jinping has held a welcome ceremony for visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping in Kyrgyzstan's capital city of Bishkek. The two leaders are holding talks on issues of mutual concern. President Xi was received by Jinping at the airport on Wednesday, and the two met at the presidential residence later that day. The Chinese leader highlighted the two countries' mutual trust and cooperation in politics and security. Jinping expressed congratulations on the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. President Xi will also attend the 19th Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Bishkek during his state visit. On to Somalia now, and the Chinese government has responded to a humanitarian appeal from the Somali government. The aid is expected to assist vulnerable families and offer healthy school meals, keeping many children in school. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has more now from Mogadishu.
The latest assistance from China is expected to target 136,000 vulnerable people over the next 6 months. The Chinese embassy in Mogadishu has handed over 4,400 metric tons of rice and other commodities to the Somali government through the UN World Food Programme for distribution all across the country. This latest contribution from China comes at a critical time in Somalia when UN aid agencies and the Somali government have expressed concerns over worsening humanitarian situation in several parts of the country.
The drought situation in Somalia is not good, but it's something we are predicting. But actually, we are in need of this food, and I hope this distribution will go to the all needy people in all 18 regions, including Somaliland. No one is going to be left behind. Yeah.
In recent months, deteriorating food security situation has been reported in most parts of the country, with delayed rainfall recorded in most areas. WFP says this has hampered food production.
Good rains have delayed, and this has an impact on the crop production and also on livestock because of these significant delays in good rains. This rice and other commodities we have seen, these are for humanitarian response, but also to some activities for nutrition, for school feeding, which are also equally important to build the resilience of the community.
In recent years, China has pumped in millions of dollars to boost humanitarian assistance in the country. Since 2017, Somalia has endured devastating effects of climate change, with floods, recurrent drought and cyclone forcing many families out of their homes.
Last year, Chinese government provided 13 million worth of food aid to Somalia, more than 6 million in assistance directed to Somali government. These are fruitful outcomes in the implementing of FOCAC and Belt and Road initiatives, which fully demonstrates sincere, friendly, and brotherly relations between China and Somalia.
Authorities, however, remain optimistic that sustained donor funding will ensure climatic shocks don't uproot communities, mainly farmers and pastoralists, from their homes. In January, Mogadishu and partner agencies appealed for $1 billion for 2019. The funding is expected to support an estimated 3.4 million out of 4.2 million people affected by conflict, climatic shocks and displacement. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
In Mauritius, a team of Chinese teachers has begun teaching Mandarin. It's part of a program of cooperation between local authorities and China.
It's Jia Liji's first lesson at this elementary school in Mauritius. Together with 2 other volunteer teachers from China, they have prepared special textbooks for students. Known as candy scrolls, the books will help children learn Mandarin faster.
First of all, we hope that the children will embrace Chinese culture and discover a whole new world. Secondly, I hope they will understand that time shall elapse and will never go back. Every stroke they learn, they are not just learning how Chinese characters are written, they're also learning a completely different way of thinking.
Mauritius is not the only African country that is keen to learn Mandarin. Countries like Kenya, Uganda and South Africa are planning to introduce the language into school curriculum.
Learning Chinese has become a new thing in Mauritius.
The Ministry of Education has included Chinese in the subjects of the entrance examination, and its score is included in the total score. The China-African friendship is blooming with the chanting and learning of the young students.
There are also some 54 Confucius Institutes teaching Mandarin spread across the entire African continent. Chomrono, CGTN.
The UK Home Secretary says he has signed a request for Julian Assange to be extradited to the US. Sajid Javid said the case will now finally be determined by the UK courts. Assange is wanted in the US to face charges of computer hacking. He faces a total of 18 counts under the US Espionage Act. Let's now turn to the impact of the conflict in Syria. The US Special Representative for Syria Engagement has been visiting Egypt. He's meeting Egyptian and Arab League officials to discuss a revival in the stalled political process in Syria. Meanwhile, a controversial Egyptian lawyer is accusing Syrian businesses of funding terrorism. In response, Egyptians have launched a massive campaign showing their appreciation in having Syrians in their country. Our Cairo correspondent Adel El Mahrouhi has more.
Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry has met the U.S. Special Representative for Syria, James Jeffrey, to discuss reviving the Syrian political process. They've discussed the latest developments, the updates in counterterrorism efforts, and the fight against ISIL. The meeting comes at a time the White House appears to be shifting its old stance on Syria.
The U.S.-Syria stance is becoming more flexible. What has been witnessed on the ground shows that President al-Assad is maintaining strong control over his territories and is still capable of forging powerful international ties, made obvious by the support from Russia and Iran. Trump is realizing that pushing Assad away is quite difficult. He's more focused on a political solution that sees a wider representation for the rest of Syrian factions and to eliminate terrorism.
Unlike Gulf countries who have been mainly supporting Syrian opposition powers, Egypt is standing on a more unbiased grounds. Cairo believes the unity of Syria and its national army are the most pressing issues. It's what has made Egypt an interesting ally for the United States in that file.
Egypt believes in national identity and unity. Therefore, it believes that preserving Syria's National Arab Army is very important. It protects the state and prevents the control of dangerous militias. Political differences should be resolved by dialogue, and that's a move Cairo supports.
The hashtag Syrians are welcome in Egypt has become a trending topic in recent days. Thousands of Egyptians have been posting testimonies of trust and appreciation in favor of the Syrian community here. They're all responding to a notorious lawyer's accusations against the integrity of Syrians in Egypt.
This hashtag has made all Syrians here so happy. The Egyptian people have stood by us and provided huge assistance and support, whether it's on a social or business level. We've never felt like foreigners. We now have so many friends and live a normal life. We don't feel Syrian. We feel we're Egyptians.
Officially, there are around 130,000 Syrians registered as refugees here in Egypt. Half of them are in Greater Cairo. The government estimates there are more than double that figure. The Anas brothers are among the active members of the community. Since 2013, they've established their own perfumes business, which has been booming in recent years.
Egypt is one of the easiest countries to set up your small business. The procedures here are very simple and somewhat fast. I think that's made clear with a number of our businesses here in Egypt.
Among all my relatives and friends who've left Syria, we all agree that the best place to be is Egypt. Unlike other nations, Egyptians are not racists. They are very generous and warm hosts. Overall, it's a satisfactory life here. We've also gotten a chance to expand our businesses and to grow without getting treated like refugees.
In Egypt, Syrians do not live in refugees camps. they do not pose any financial burden on the North African nation. Many of them have worked tremendously to establish their own businesses.
Syrian businesses in Egypt have increased significantly in recent years. The investment reached about $800 million US. 818 Syrian companies have been established in Egypt in the first 9 months of 2018. That's over a total of 5,700 companies established since 1970. Most of the investments are in the food and beverage industry and in textiles. This had an extremely positive impact on the Egyptian market. It created jobs and revived trade.
The reputation of Syrian businesses are so well established here to the extent that some Egyptian businesses would adopt Syrian names to attract more customers. And it appears that the attempt of Egypt's infamous lawyer to tarnish the reputation of their businesses has actually put the spotlights on how successful Syrians are here in Egypt. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
We have got all the business news coming up for you after the break, including anti-corruption bodies across Africa meet in Nigeria to develop new strategies of dealing with graft. And the International Monetary Fund completes Angola's first review and approves a disbursement of nearly $250 million.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Anti-corruption bodies across Africa have been meeting in the Nigerian capital Abuja to develop new strategies to deal with corruption. The summit has been organised by Nigeria's anti-graft body, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, alongside some African leaders. CGTN's Deji Badmus now reports.
Elections across most of Africa are heavily monetized and quite expensive, giving rise to rampant corruption in the process. While most African countries have laws governing electoral spending, enforcing them has always been a huge challenge. It's partly for that reason that Nigeria's anti-graft watchdog, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has called this summit of anti-corruption bodies on the continent to discuss, share experiences and come up with new ways to deal with the problem.
Electoral spending by politicians is often linked to both inducement in Africa and in our local palace, both by. Worthy of note is the fact that whenever one is induced to sell his vote, he automatically loses the moral equilibrium to challenge corrupt tendencies of those elected.
Voter inducement is indeed commonplace in elections across Africa and is mainly at the heart of what makes elections here an expensive affair. Some of the key speakers here say Africa cannot afford the consequences of not doing anything about it.
I urge all law enforcement agencies and the judiciary in Nigeria and across Africa to tackle financial corruption in our political system. Uncontrolled electoral spending and voter inducement by politicians must be combated if we want to consolidate true democracy and good governance.
This is a campaign that can be won. Tolerating corruption is a choice, not an inevitability. It is within our power to end it. That is the most important starting point. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time for us to keep talking about it. the primary responsibility to act lies with leaders at every level.
Corruption remains a big issue in Africa. The continent's leaders declared 2018 as Africa's anti-corruption year, but not much progress has been made since then. Africa didn't fare well either in the last Corruption Perception Index, with only 8 out of 49 countries scoring more than 43 out of 100 on the index.
The long-term health not only of Nigeria but our continent demands that the critical majority of the masses must have a change of heart. And that is why it gladdens my heart that beyond the convictions we are also educating the population and creating an environment where the children of darkness, who are the perpetrators of corruption, will not have the oxygen to breathe.
It remains to be seen what difference the resolutions and ideas that will emanate from that hall will make on the ground in Africa's fight against what is considered to be the biggest obstacle holding it from achieving its potentials. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Nigeria.
The International Monetary Fund has completed the first review of Angola's extended arrangement and approved a disbursement of $245.15 million. This has taken total disbursements under the extended arrangement to about $1.24 billion. IMF's Deputy Managing Director and Acting Chair, David Lipton, says Angolan authorities have demonstrated strong commitment to policies under the programme. However, a weakened external environment, heightened by the volatility in the international price of crude oil, is posing challenges to the reforms. Organisations recognise that data is what fuels digital transformation, and increasingly so in recent years. The advent of artificial intelligence has presented new ways of transformation. CGTN's Angelo Coppola now looks at how these developments are forcing companies to adapt.
In fact, artificial intelligence pilots and experimentation are now prolific across many South African companies, with businesses showing a willingness to embrace AI and experiment using new technology. But there is one hurdle that needs to be overcome.
According to the study, it shows that 46% of the companies are already experimenting with AI technologies in the country, but we see a lot of that is mostly pilot projects, and it's literally across most industries. What's holding companies back is because we just do not have sufficient skills.
AI exploration is sector agnostic. Everyone is looking at the new technology and wondering how it can assist their businesses.
So the first movers are definitely financial services sector, coming out of insurance industry. For example, you will see in the study we mentioned Discovery, as well as we see the retail industry. But I think we're also very excited about the opportunity that this would bring for agriculture, for healthcare. If you can just think about some of the healthcare breakthroughs we could drive with, precise diagnosis and treatment.
Turning to pure science, the Square Kilometre Array in South Africa's Northern Cape Province is the world's largest radio telescope network, and it's already benefiting from quantum computing and artificial intelligence.
Within a project from the SKA is part of the SETI Institute, which is us looking for extraterrestrial life. Now, there's a lot of stars out there, and how do you search through every single one star to identify whether it is a planet that could have life on it? In order to do that, it has to fit a very specific set of criteria. So what we know is the criteria that works on Earth. So we have our labeled data set, and we can use that information and propagate it and generalize it throughout the universe, and then look for that same criteria out in space to see what does and what doesn't work.
On the other hand, the key challenge for most businesses is one of employment and the impact on employee numbers.
Out of the study, it shows that 54% of companies are worried as to what the impact could be on jobs when it comes to, artificial intelligence combined with automation. And if you just have to think about it, there is a bit of a concern about the long-term impact.
According to the pundits, artificial intelligence is going to supplement human intelligence, not replace it. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Kenya Airways has increased its route offering by launching flights to Rome and Geneva. The new routes are the airline's 4th and 5th European destinations after Amsterdam, London and Paris. The introduction of these routes is part of Kenya Airways' network expansion strategy, steered towards growing its market share, increasing revenues and financial turnaround. The launch of this direct route completes the circuit across the UN headquarters in New York, Nairobi, Geneva, making logistics and connectivity easier for travellers. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including an international company operating in Uganda doubles maternity leave for its female employees.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Uganda now, where a private company in the East African nation is trying to help new mothers in the workplace by doubling their maternity leave. The organisation is part of the international Diageo Group. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria now reports.
Uganda Breweries Limited says all its female employees are now entitled to 6 months paid maternity leave, an increase from 3 months. The male employees will earn a 1-month paternity leave, up from 4 days. The company believes more time with family improves productivity at work.
And we realized that maternity leave was king. A lot of, the time that we're already giving was brief, and many women would come back home still feeling, let me say, homesick, or the need to still be home and be with their babies.
The Employment Act in Uganda allows for only 90 days maternity leave, but not all employers abide by this. Yet not many companies have nurseries for mothers to nurse their babies as they work. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics estimates only 40% of women are employed in corporate organizations. Campaigners hope the new policy will help improve this.
We feel that this will encourage women to enable them balance work and family life. Currently in Uganda, we still experience a lot of discrimination for young women and women at all in workplaces, because employers feel like it's kind of a burden to them to hire women within their productive age, because this comes with a huge expenditure.
However, the Federation of Uganda Employers does not agree with the move to double maternity leave.
We have some employers who have also complained that because we have good maternal health care and insurance, then the female employee will make it a habit to keep giving birth every year.
Activists are now lobbying the government to amend the Employment Act and increase maternity leave for all new mothers to 6 months. The issue of increasing maternity leave has been a salient topic of discussion in this country, and now that Uganda Breweries has implemented it, campaigners are hopeful many employers will take it up. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
In Botswana, Habane Pottery, which was established in 1983 to create employment for local citizens, is still going strong. But the craft in the southern African country is at risk of disappearing altogether because there are very few master potters. CT10's Daniel Arapmoy has more.
The Habane Pottery is located approximately 15 kilometers northwest of the capital, Gaborone. It is a special place for those who are passionate about pottery. The pottery skills of the women and men here relate to the practice of using a specific technique to produce artifacts for home use, corporate designs, animal figurines inspired by the environment. Martin Kabwe is a master potter who has been in the pottery business for more than a decade. His molding skills have seen many young men and women fall in love with this traditional practice in Botswana. The experience of pottery making is so fascinating that I was granted a rare chance to try my rather limited pottery hands, making my own unique piece. It's breathtaking looking at clay wares and decorative crafts on display everywhere. In the room, other women artists can be seen molding various elegant merchandise, though with little hope of making any profit from their hard work.
Sometimes we get worried when there's no business because this is mostly our livelihood.
Despite the creative and tireless efforts of potters to preserve the tradition in Botswana, the industry remains on the decline. The practice of pottery in Botswana remains at risk of extinction because of the decreasing number of master potters, low prices for finished goods, and the increasing use of mass-produced containers.
Most people, especially the young ones, they're not interested especially in taking up pottery as their career because they see that, well, maybe it is a dirty job or maybe it is something that does not give them enough income.
The government of Botswana is now trying to help potters through the tourism industry by encouraging locals and foreign tourists to support the works of the potters. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Gabane, Botswana.
Let's now head to South Sudan, where a group of American filmmakers are in the world's youngest nation to promote filmmaking. The group, supported by the US Embassy and Mandela Washington Fellowship, say despite the violence in South Sudan, the country's film industry has an opportunity to grow. CT10's Patrick Oyet reports.
These American filmmakers say they are inspired by stories of the South Sudanese people's resilience despite 6 years of civil war. They are providing free training on documentary filmmaking. They say movies could help to unite South Sudanese people, especially if peace returns to the country.
I really admire the filmmakers here who are trying very hard to learn how to share stories through film. Film, you know, is a very emotional medium. It's a very good way to share stories about reality.
South Sudan doesn't have even a single functioning cinema. The only one that existed several years ago has been turned into a church after falling out of use because of the war. Filmmakers say they face many challenges here.
Currently in the country, people don't understand the role of the film in development, the role of the film in change. No one is ready to put in his money to sponsor a film or documentary.
If I'm in the field, I'll be threatened always. I'll always be threatened because most of people here, they don't know the work of the journalist or a photographer or a filmmaker. They don't think that the photographer or a filmmaker is another profession, like being a doctor, being an engineer, or being whatever you are. They just take it as they just take like some of us as spy. Like if I'm now on my way with a camera, they thought that I'm going to harm people.
The filmmakers also say they are frustrated by movies tackling social issues being hard to get onto television in South Sudan, but the Americans providing the training in Juba say there is an opportunity for growth in the industry.
You can tell your story, you can tell someone else's story if you don't feel ready to tell yours, but there's a lot of very unique stories here about the desire to return home, the desire to make a strong nation, a desire to decrease illiteracy.
The American filmmakers say their South Sudanese colleagues have a big role to play in promoting the country's positive cultural practices and efforts towards peace. They hope their training here will help filmmakers to acquire the required skills to succeed in the industry. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including...